It's the end of the year. I'm getting reflective. I've got 9 top observations on e-commerce and entrepreneurship this year. As we head into 2026, let's not waste any time and let's get right into my top 9 observations of the year. My number 1 observation is alone worth this video, I think. I think if all you did was watch or listen to this observation, you would be in really good shape. If you just sort of really heard what I'm saying for number 1, and you put it into practice, I think many, many brands would go from having brands that don't really work to like good quality brands. Now, so let me just say it, and let me just say what the observation is, okay? Number 1, most brands, I think, are overspending on ads. I think most brands are overspending on ads. And I'm going to give you a few specific ways in which they are doing this. I just see this over and over and over again. It's so rare that I see a brand that is not spending enough money on advertising. Almost every brand. And there's a really obvious reason for this, which is that brands want to grow. And so they spend ad dollars because they want to grow. Now, I want you to interrogate, and I'm going to come back to this in a little bit. I want you to interrogate the reason you want to grow. But before you do that, I just want to say that thought of in the most, like, in just the simplest terms of what kind of return do you get on your dollars? And maybe let's just think about the idea of taking that same dollar and plowing it into the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ or whatever your ETF of choice is, okay? Your index fund of choice. Like if you just took the money you're spending on ads and took it out of your business and put it instead into one of those places, how would it return? What would the return be relative to the ad dollars in your business? I think for a lot of brands, it is literally the case that it would be a better return because your ad dollars are returning negative money. And there are a lot of ways it's doing this. So the first place is just generally speaking. Brands so often tell themselves all kinds of things about why it is a good idea for them to spend money that loses money. They work at too thin of a new customer ROAS. They work at too thin of an AMER. They are spending all of this money and they're telling themselves, oh, because we want to grow or because we're learning or because we have to hit a certain percentage revenue, whatever. And it's just bad. Like you're just spending money you shouldn't be spending. This happens across the board in your business. It happens on ad channels all the time. I've just talked to brands where they're like Google Ads accounts are just gigantic amounts of waste between branded search and then like what I've come to call Google soup ads, like Performance Max and Demand Gen ads where it's like, it's sort of, you think the ad is one thing, but it's actually like a mix of display and search and shopping and video and all this kind of stuff in different places, retargeting new customers, existing customers, whatever. Look, I'm very pro machine learning and algorithms to distribute your ad dollars, but I just look over and over and I'm like, there's so much wasted money here. It's why I was so happy to take Zato Marketing, the Google Ads agency, as a sponsor for the month of December. They're not even sponsoring this episode specifically, but it's like, because I look so often at accounts on Google where there's just like tens of thousands of wasted dollars per year. Tens of thousands. It's like, it's a lot of money, right? For 7 or 8 early 8-figure brand or something like that. You just don't have to be spending that much for it to be a total waste. I have a client right now that turned off their Google account and it's just like, they're not generating more money than they were before, but they're definitely generating more contribution dollars than they were before. It just had no obvious impact on the business in terms of positive outcome. And they turned it off after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in the previous year. And I don't think their hundreds of thousands of dollars return no money or anything like that. But I think what it did is that it produced a negative value when you looked at the actual incremental return. And that is part of the reason, the incrementality idea is part of the reason why so many brands are wasting money. Is because you've never actually thought about, is your spend generating incremental return? Now, this is sometimes a simple question. If you have a really simple media mix, you get this simply. If you're just running on Facebook ads entirely, then like it's fairly simple to see if that's where your new customers are coming from. If you're not running Facebook, if you're running more than Facebook ads, or if you have multiple channels like the Amazon and D2C, you start looking at things like this, it becomes harder to answer this question, but it is incumbent on you to do it. You must do it. So it's something increasingly in 2026, like I think it's gonna be a major emphasis of AJF Growth as an agency is to continue to help brands get real clarity around questions of incrementality, the actual contribution of their spend. And third, not just incrementality, and of course that word, like it's important to be define it, by the way. What I mean is, does each dollar you spend, not just in-platform reported ROAS, not just your triple whale ROAS, which lies to you just like everything else does, your Northbeam ROAS, like none of these things are, your MMMs, your MTAs, your in-platform ROAS, they are all telling you various stories that are various levels of believable, and you shouldn't just trust any of them. So incrementality is the way of saying like, what is the actual incremental return? What is the actual dollar return on my dollars? How many customers bought from me because of my ad dollars that were not going to buy otherwise, whether they're new customers, existing customers, whatever the answer to that question is. So the incrementality in general is a question, but there's actually another place where I think brands are, oh, by the way, another one is creative testing. Like I've talked about this, beat this into the ground, but it's just another area that I think brands are way too comfortable spending money at a negative return. The reason I harp on this all the time is I just see these large line items of wasted dollars, and you should put the burden of proof on any item, any line item in your business that shows a negative return. There should be a very strong burden of proof on that line item on somebody spending that money for you to keep spending it. They should be able to show you in a very clear way why it is necessary to spend that money if it looks like a negative return. And some of them are worth spending on still, okay? But they should be able to make that really, really clear. Okay, here's what I was saying though. I got a little distracted, sorry. The return of marginal ad spend is another area where I think brands, I've said this before, but it's a hard concept to understand correctly. I'm trying to illustrate this, and I'll give you a little like visual here if you are watching this to understand this concept a little bit more. If you're just listening to it, that's okay. I think you're going to be able to get it either way. But here's the concept of your marginal ad spend. Okay, if you are spending $10,000 in a day, okay, you are not really spending $10,000 in a day. What you are spending is multiple buckets of smaller spends, okay? And I don't mean this at the campaign level. What I mean is everybody knows that if you spend more money on the same ads, in most cases, the efficiency of those ads is going to decline, okay? So it's going to hurt performance if you spend more. This, of course, is why you can't scale your spend forever, right? The reason you can't go from $1,000 a day in spend to $100,000 a day in spend, even if your $1,000 a day spend is producing a 2-to-1 ROAS and you're comfortable with a 2-to-1 ROAS, the reason you can't take it to $100,000 is that the more that you spend, the worse the return gets. And so what that implies is, okay, that not all spend is created equal. In that scenario I just gave you, you didn't really spend $100,000. You spent 100 sets of $1,000, okay? Or of course you could break it up even further than that if you want to, or 1,000 sets of $100. Like all of those would be reasonable ways to say this. So you would actually have been able to spend that $1,000 just fine, which implies that the 2-to-1 ROAS that you got on that first $1,000 was real, and you should spend that money, okay? And that's a good use of your dollars. But the ROAS that you get on dollars, maybe 1,001 through 100,000, maybe that entire thing, maybe that is all bad spend. Like I don't know. But here's the way I'm visualizing this, okay? So imagine that you are targeting a 1.5 ROAS, okay, on a $10,000 per day spend. You're targeting a 1.5 ROAS. For whether it's a good target or a bad target, doesn't matter for this case, okay? What I want you to imagine is the way that 1.5 actually works out in spend. So if you're targeting a 1.5, like, or let me put it a different way. If you have a 1.5 as the number at which you say, when I acquire customers at a 1.5, it is a good use of my money. The return on that capital is good, okay? Let's say that's the situation for your business. And it could be whatever. Again, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Just go with it, okay? 1.5 is there. That actually means that you probably shouldn't be spending. In fact, almost certainly you should not be spending to a 1.5 ROAS in the ad account. Why? Because your ROAS in the ad account is an average. And the average, by definition, has some dollars being spent under the average and some dollars being spent over the average. And often it's the case that they are wildly varying. And so if a 1.5 is the bottom tier at which you can acquire customers and have it be a positive return on your money, okay, if that's the case, then you should probably have an actual ROAS in the account of, 1.8 or 1 or 2 or whatever, something like that. Who knows? Okay, so here's one way I've illustrated this. This is not from any brand's particular data. This is just like a way of thinking about this, okay? Imagine that $10,000 per day spend is averaging $15,000 in return, so a 1.5. But now imagine you could perfectly see 5 buckets of that spend, okay? And those buckets correspond to the first 20% of the money you spend, the next 20% of the money you spend, the next 20% of the money you spend, and so on, okay? And there's only so much precision you can get with this, but here's the idea, okay? In bucket 1, that first 2,000, if you're averaging a 1.5 at the end, perhaps bucket 1 gets you a 2.4, okay? Perhaps bucket 2 gets you a 1.8. Perhaps bucket 3 gets you a 1.5, your bottom end number. Perhaps bucket 4 is a 1.3. And maybe you even say, at a 1.3, I'll take it. It's like break even-ish, and I'm happy to get the impressions in the marketplace, and that's fine, okay, and that's fine. But bucket 5 now is at a 0.5. It's just like a massive drop-off in efficiency, okay? Bucket 5 and maybe bucket 4 is what I am talking about as the marginal spend, where there is huge amounts of wasted money happening. I've run one incrementality test for a client that showed that their bucket 5 spend, so to speak, was producing like a 0.1 ROAS, despite that their blended average ROAS was a 1.8. Now, I don't believe that point one ROAS was always the case forever on all of their spend. It was one snapshot of one bucket of spend, done via one pulse up incrementality study. And if you reran it, you might come up with some different numbers. But it was real bad, okay? And so we turned around and looked at that and said, wait a minute, we should actually be spending much more conservatively as a general rule, because that last bucket of spend is producing a very, very, very poor return. And that's what I mean when saying there's a huge amount of wasted money and you're overspending, because so few brands are actually thinking this way. They just pick their average return, 1.5, that's what we want, and then they spend to 1.5, not realizing that there's like hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars in wasted ad dollars in your ad account. And to me, that's like a huge, huge problem. And it's a huge problem because there's so much wasted money there, okay? And then on top of that, there's another way that brands waste money all the time, which is that they fight their seasonality. I'm going to show you one more screen share here. Again, if you're just listening to this, you should be able to get this just fine, okay? This is some anonymized data that I saw that, so just, again, this doesn't correspond to sort of any actual brand's performance, because I took a real brand's performance and anonymized it in a bunch of different ways to illustrate this point. So it is sort of real in the sense that I've watched a brand actually do this. And what it shows is it's a line graph with two lines, okay? And it's spend and ROAS, and it's different times of year on the line graph. And what you would see if you were looking at this, and if you're not looking at this, if you're not looking at this, okay, but if you are looking at this, what you see is that there are moments in the year where the ROAS gets below like 1.5, 1.4 levels, and spend declines some, but the spend picks up at some other moments where the ROAS goes up, but not all the way to the highest number. And in fact goes probably above a target that they care about. So like, if, for example, at one point in this graph, the spend is going up and the ROAS is at a 3-to-1. And I just know like this brand probably has, I don't know, like a lot of brands, 60, 65% gross margin, cost of delivery, landed margin, basically net of all cost of delivery. Okay. And so if you're spending and you're at a 3-to-1 ROAS, or at a 2 or a 2.5, even if you're at your spend peak and you're at a 2 or you're at a 2.5 ROAS and you have 65 points of margin, okay, you're at a 2.5 to 3. Your spend, even if it's at your highest that it has been all year, probably should go higher, unless what I said in the last segment here is true of your business, in the sense that like you are you'll just spend down your efficiency. That's also possible, okay? But then at other times of year, the spend comes down, but actually the ROAS gets so low that almost certainly they are losing money during those low spend times. And so what I'm saying is like the spend, drops down to a couple $100,000, a few $100,000 here, and goes up to like 1.4 million. And that's a monthly spend. Okay. That's a huge range of spend, and brands hate this. Every operator I've been around hates this. They get so frustrated during the low spend times of year. Okay. But what your chart should probably look like here in your spend is that ROAS basically ought to be constant throughout the year, unless your margin profile changes materially, different products sell, something like that. The LTV of your customers varies wildly. The red line on this graph should basically be flat. Let's say your 2-to-1 is your target. It should be a 2-to-1 all year long, all year long. And the blue spend line is the thing that should be really, really variable, even more variable than it often looks. But what brands do all the time is during their down seasons, for whatever reason, they just feel this need to keep spending ad dollars during their down seasons. And during their peak seasons, they let their AMER and their ROAS get extra, extra high when perhaps they shouldn't. And I'm really thinking here about ROAS, not just AMER, because it's possible that there's delayed value from spend of yours to where it's going to make the AMER go up, or there's organic revenue that's going to make the AMER go up, or whatever, right? So all these different things. But the actual return on your spend ought to be pretty consistent. And it ought to be pretty consistent because your margin profile probably doesn't change that much. But what brands do so often is they overspend their low moments and they underspend their big moments. And then they spend a ton of time spinning their wheels trying to figure out how to make their low moments bigger, because they're so frustrated to be in those low times of the year. Listen, if you're going to try and make your low moments bigger, you can maybe do it with product. It's probably not worth your time, by the way. But before you get there, at the very least, spend more during your peaks, spend less during your valleys, limit the damage during the valley time, and lean into the tailwind time, right? Don't fight headwinds, go with tailwinds. That's the goal. And if you do that, you'll spend your money more efficiently. If you put together everything I just said, you will see why I'm belaboring this first point, because it's sort of my number one point overall, which is that, again, if brands are generally overspending and that they're setting targets that are too low for themselves, just to start, they're just spending too much money on ads to begin with, okay? Secondly, they're not paying attention to incremental return. Third, they're not thinking about the marginal impact of their spend. Fourth, they are blowing money on creative testing and on things like Google ad branded search and Google Soup ads and all of these different kinds of things, okay? And fifth, if they are doing all of that while also thinking about their seasonality calendar wrong and yet still growing businesses that are pretty good, because every business I've talked about so far actually is a good business on the whole, okay, then there is so much more money to be made for e-commerce businesses if they would just think smarter about their ad spend. Another way of framing this whole thing, okay, is that for most brands, ad spend is the number one or number two line item on their books. It is often a larger line item. Your Facebook bill, for many people watching or listening to this, is a larger line item on your books than your COGS. And that's the thing fighting for number two. And maybe you'd throw your COGS in with, shipping and things like that. But yeah, I mean, for many brands are spending 30 to 40%, sometimes more, of their revenue on ad dollars, which means making that 30 to 40% of your money. Let's just call it 35% of your money, okay? If you could make that 10% better, it would add like 3 points to your bottom line or something like that. If you just made it 10% better. And I think a lot of brands can make it 20 to 25% better, if not more. It can really open up the profitability of your business and can really make a huge difference. I want you to be allergic to spending bad ad dollars, spending bad money in general, because there's other places this is happening too. But I want you to hate it. I want you to make somebody justify these things in your business. Why are you spending the way they are? And you don't need to rake them over the coals if they're making that mistake. Everybody makes this mistake. We're all lured into spending bad monies, but there should be accountability. There should be clarity. You should find ways to get clear about where the ad dollars are leaking out of your business. And then you should redirect them to the places where it's actually generating value. And even if all you do is just do that in this next year, you might shrink a little. It's true. But it may well be a good kind of shrinking because it makes your business more sustainable, cash flow better, all these things, because you open up profit in your business, and that's really good. All right. There's 9 more of these. I've already been talking for a long time, so we got to keep moving. But that is by far the biggest one, like I said, the one that I wanted you to get to. Okay? None of the rest of these are going to take that long. Let's see. Number 2. Related to that, we need a wider range of success stories. We just need a wider range of success stories in e-commerce. I think if I were to answer the question, if somebody asked me, why are brands overspending? I would say some of it is because it's confusing and hard, right? It's a skill thing. It's really hard to see the bucket 5 spend that you have, the marginal impact of your spend. Though, because many of us feel this need somewhere to just keep growing endlessly and really fast, because you're listening to the wonderful Marketing Operators podcasts. Great people building great businesses who are really smart, and you should learn from them. I'm not saying one single bad thing about them. I like learning from those guys. I call some of them friends. I am grateful for them. But if all you're listening to is the stories of the 9-figure businesses, then there's going to be a thing that's going to happen in your soul. And I mean it, in your soul. It's happening somewhere deeper down than your brain, where you are going to feel the need to prove yourself and grow faster and be bigger, etc. And it will get you into bad habits. It is this belief that you must grow more. And so actually, one of my goals in 2026 on the podcast is to tell more success stories that are less obvious success stories. I just did an episode about, this guy, Henry Boldazar, who's listened to 200 of my podcast episodes, quit his job as a coder, is making more money now on his own app that he developed, is running the Facebook ads themselves, and is living his life that way while trying to grow his business. Has he reached the mountaintop of a 9-figure monster business? Does he have a unicorn app yet? No. Is he making more money than before working for himself and growing a business? Yes. Is that an awesome outcome? Yes. Is he gaining more skills than he was just as a coder? Yes. Like, there's all of this value to be had in stories like that. I'm probably going to bring on a 7-figure guy, early 7 figures, like just over $1 million in revenue, something like that, pretty soon, who is doing this as a side gig on that business and is pumping like 30% SDE on that business. 30% SDE on a $1 million business, in case you are not clear, is $300,000 a year. That's a good business, and it's a side gig for this guy. That's a really good outcome, and it will never be featured in these big, huge things. So yeah, I just think we've got to get clarity to the fact that you can grow a great business. And in fact, that businesses are valued on their bottom line, not their top line. Like, it just, that alone should make you want to go build a really highly profitable business. I'm not saying you shouldn't be ambitious. I'm not saying that at all. I think it's great. I'm not saying you shouldn't strive for excellence and learn from the best. I think you should do all those things. In some ways, I'm challenging myself in those exact areas this year. Should I be a little more ambitious than I am? Should I be striving for a level of excellence that so far I've let myself off the hook on? Should I be trying to grow a bigger business? Something, all these things. But we just need more stories of success that are not insane monster stories, because they're just really, really important, because it is successful. Serious, thoughtful, profit-driven operators everywhere are using INTELLIGEMS for their on-site split testing for their e-commerce brands. That's because INTELLIGEMS is an amazing tool that is built for profit-driven, serious, and smart operators. And it's built for that in a few different ways. One of them is that INTELLIGEMS allows you to test way beyond the basics of split testing to do the things that really matter and really move the needle. Like before you go test that button color, go and test the shipping threshold, free shipping threshold on your website. Go test the price of products on your website. Go test how much you're charging for shipping on your website. Go test things that really matter. Your site-wide first new customer discount. Should it be a stacked offer? Get, buy more, save more? Should it be a BOGO? Should it be a 10% off? Like, what should the offer be? Well, there's a way to answer that question is to test it. And you should be testing those kinds of things. With INTELLIGEMS, you can do that quickly and easily. It's a very fast install. You don't need a developer. And of course, you can also use it to test all the little things as well, like headlines and design and all of that kind of stuff. You can actually test now at the checkout flow in Shopify, which is awesome. And you can even test full Shopify theme tests. So if you're doing a site redesign, definitely before you push that live, test it with INTELLIGEMS. Go do all that stuff. Merchandising on your site, menus, everything like that. But get those big things first because those are the real needle movers that you probably have never tested. You've never tested your free shipping threshold, but it makes a real difference for how customers interact with your brand. So go test it. Secondly, though, beyond testing beyond the basics, they also give you very easy and clear measurement for this with down to the level of profit. And this is a really critical point. If you test your free shipping threshold, right, maybe you need to lower it and it's like, oh, great, we converted more traffic. But also now we're not collecting for shipping anymore and it's actually hurting our margin. And what's the net impact of those two things, even with some tools that are developing to start having you be able to analyze those things even relative to LTV, which is awesome. So there's a whole bunch there, but you really want to be able to test this down to the level of profit. INTELLIGEMS ties into your COGS data, your actual cost of goods data in your Shopify store to output the value creation on every cell of every test that you run down to the level of profit. Really awesome tool. You can get 20% off of it for your first 3 months. INTELLIGEMS.io. Maybe all of my clients are using INTELLIGEMS. Almost every client I've ever worked with does. It's just really awesome. INTELLIGEMS.io, FARS20, FARS20 gets you 20% off your first 3 months. Get it going today. Start testing smarter. Number 3. Media buying makes a huge difference. Don't believe people when they tell you otherwise. It has become a trope in the e-commerce space that media buying is dead. Media buying doesn't matter that much anymore for all kinds of reasons, whether it's automation or AI or machine learning or just like the reality of targeting in the present meta environment or something like that. Like there's just this trope out there that media buying is dead and doesn't make that much of a difference. I fully believe that's wrong. So many brands who are watching or listening to this video right now, so many people in agencies who are watching or listening to this video right now are wasting gigantic amounts of money in their media buying. And it's related to point number 1. It's become a deeper conviction of mine. First of all, I think it's really hard right now. Media buying is really hard. There's a lot of options thrown at you all the time. Secondly, for me as a person running manual bids, one of my big convictions in the last year related to this is that manual bids got sold as being really, really easy. You just set your cost cap or your bid cap or your target ROAS and you just kind of walk away and that's it. And it's just not. That's just not true. It's actually pretty hard to do it right. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that, mostly related to how the future is unlike the past at different times. And there's no way for machine learning to know that right away. There's also questions about financial clarity and a lot of the things I said in sort of point 1 here. The media buyers need to be on those because they're deploying the largest line item in your business. You should get the best media buyers you possibly can for those line items because they have such an outsized impact on the growth and profitability of your business. And it's really, really hard. Anytime anybody tells you media buying doesn't matter anymore, I just think it's wrong. I'm watching what AJF Growth is doing for clients right now. And I'm just watching so many businesses and accounts I get my eyes on, not even necessarily from people who are coming for me to audit because they want me to work with them or something like that, because there's selection bias in that, right? The kind of brand that's looking at changing agencies is the kind of brand that probably has some under optimization in the first place. So I don't want to just go off that experience because of that selection bias problem, but I just am seeing it over and over. It's something I've heard Taylor Holiday say recently, and from talking to him about what he's seeing as well. It's as hard now as it has ever been. I don't think it's getting easier. And I think you shouldn't listen when somebody tells you media buying instead is not that important. It's all about creative. It's all about the offer, etc. Nope. All important. It all matters to build a great business, especially once again, if it is related to the largest line item in your business. It matters. It matters how you distribute the money. It matters what you do. There's huge amounts of money wasted. There's huge amounts of money to be made doing it right. It really, really matters that you get it right for your bottom line and for your growth trajectory. Number 4, the reason that you are tempted to give too much of your life to work is not because of a boss who is standing over your shoulder or something like that. The reason you are tempted to give too much of your life to work is because you like your work. And that is the whole problem. The reason you are tempted to give too much time to work and not enough time to your kids, and I'm not talking here about you have to get down to 20 hours a work week to be a good dad. Like, I work a regular work week like other people do. I'm also not trying to generalize too much with my views of work versus other people's. Forget that for a second. I'm just saying that when you are tempted to give too much of your time in your life and wrap up too much of your identity in your work, it is because the work is joyful and pleasurable, right? And so the enjoyment of the work is a really big challenge. The pleasure in your work is a wonderful thing. And like, I love that it's such a gift and such a privilege that I get to do work I like. But this is definitely getting at conversations I had with Olivia Corey a couple weeks ago on this podcast. To go check that out that we were discussing. But something I've talked with a lot of people about. Like, when I'm tempted to sort of give too much of my life to my work, it is because I like the work and because I find pleasure in it. But there are times when it's just way easier to do that than it is to give my life to other things that are really important in my life. That can be all kinds of things. That can be fitness, right? Like, just like staying healthy. One of the reasons people don't work out is because they give too much of their lives to work. And they just can't find the time. It can be my family. Like I said, I've said this before, but I have a 6-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, soon to be 4-year-old. It's just much easier to work on work problems than it is for me to like color with a 6-year-old. Like, I don't really like coloring that much, to be honest with you, or whatever. You can just come up with anything you want. And I don't have to color all the time with my 6-year-old to be a good dad. That's not the point. And I love my 6-year-old. That's not the problem either. It's just that like all of these different things. What about like time with friends? Time in a community like in a church or something like that, where there's like a real value to the involvement of these kinds of things. All of these things that are really important. Your work can eat all of these things up. Time with your spouse, obviously, is a huge one. There's just a lot in life. And the problem is the work is really stimulating and enjoyable. So I say that because one of the great challenges that I feel in life is that I have desires that sometimes don't actually lead me to the best long-term outcomes. And dealing with that desire is the really hard thing. So I'll leave that there, but that is the hard thing about working too much. If you are working a whole lot and you have a sense that you should be working less, it might just be some weird guilt complex of yours that you should shut off. Okay. Maybe you're doing fine. I have that some. But it also might be that you recognize that this is the fundamental challenge for you. So there's that. Okay. Number 5, AppLovin, Axon, whatever it is called. I don't really understand these days. AppLovin is real and it will keep growing in impact. Get good at it. This is another 2026 initiative for AJF Growth. We are going to keep digging into AppLovin. I've now, again, run incrementality studies a couple times here. The most recent one I ran showed really, really strong incrementality. And we actually launched that incrementality study. What I should say by really, really strong was the incrementality that we saw for a brand recently that was spending, the most recent one I saw was for a brand where basically the 7-day click reported revenue in AppLovin, in their ads manager, okay, in their dashboard, was basically right on with the sort of relatively immediate term return, the incremental return of the ad spend, which is really good. I mean, that means it's a really, really strong number. That was before we launched that test, before AppLovin introduced the ability to target new customers only, like prospecting only, which is a really big change. It was one of the fundamental problems with AppLovin. But as AppLovin has shown repeatedly throughout this year, it is still so early. So the incrementality studies are showing up to be good. I heard Common Thread Collective, who's much more ad spend than we do, right, said it was the number 3 channel for them this year, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, behind Meta and Google. Their incrementality studies they've said have looked good as well. I've heard House say the incrementality studies look good. So it is real. But the thing I would point out also is that like the dashboard has gotten much, much better this year. They've introduced the ability to prospect, which was a huge issue previously in AppLovin. They've introduced some international targeting, which is a big deal. They've made the builder a lot easier to where you can do different end cards and different ads all in one like ad collection, basically, to where it gets easier. There's more machine learning involved. There's manual, like all of these things are happening all the time. They're getting more advertisers on the platform, which means to hear them tell it, it's not just like, oh no, CPMs are going to go up. It's that they're going to get more data to optimize with and work with. Like, I just am a big believer. They have a whole bunch of users using AppLovin, playing mobile games. So they have those kinds of things. And they're delivering ads that sell products. And whether or not it's ever going to rival Meta or something, I don't know. Probably not, right? But it's real. It's real. And it can be a real value to your spend. So get good at it, learn it, understand what good media buying looks like there. I think it's still early enough that nobody really knows the answer to that question yet. I've seen some whisperings here and there about a few things. But yeah, that's a conviction of mine. I think there's going to be real value there. AppLovin is real. Invest in it. Get good at it. Something we're doing as well. Okay. It is time to get serious about your supply chain in 2026. So many brands are so under-optimized here, and it's crazy. And the thing is, I have a solution for you for this problem of paying too much in COGS, of having too high of MOQs, of having vendors who are hard to work with, of having too long of lead times, of having bad payment terms. The solution to that problem is my friends at Move Supply Chain. Move Supply Chain is a supply chain agency, just like I have a growth agency, that works for and with your brand, bringing specific expertise around supply chain to your business so that they can help you solve all the things I just talked about, which are really tricky. Sourcing new vendors and getting better relationships and negotiating deals, it's hard and time-intensive work. And the beauty of Move Supply Chain is they bring many, many years of experience in supply chains, in e-commerce supply chains specifically, to your business. They can look at your supply chain, tell you what's wrong with it, and then they can also help you do the work of optimizing it. And on top of that, they are based in the Philippines, which is really advantageous for you in a couple different ways. One of them is that it's affordable. So because they're based in the Philippines, they have people with deep experience where your dollars just go really far to attract great quality supply chain talent on your team. I know because I'm building my own e-commerce brands, supply chain, with their help, and they have been awesome. They know so much more than I do about supply chains. Okay, but secondly, on top of that, it's a very, very short flight, an easy flight to both China and Vietnam, where so much manufacturing happens in the world. So they are there a lot and can get there on behalf of your team without you having to take, a 15-hour flight or whatever it is. So it's really, really valuable. What you should do is, if you have this lingering idea in your head that your supply chain could be better, that your COGS could be cheaper, that things could get to you faster, all those kinds of things, you should go to movesupplychain.com, schedule an intake call, tell them your situation, and see if they can help you. Just see if they can help you, see what they might say. I bet you they can, and they're really awesome. I'm a huge fan of Move. I've been working with them in some capacity or another for years now at this point. Originally, they were an offshoot of their sister company, More Staffing. So go check it out today. Get on a call, movesupplychain.com. Get your supply chain dialed in. Your whole business will work better if you have a better supply chain. Great operators care about the supply chain. You should be one of them. Movesupplychain.com. Number 6. All right. Arguably my most controversial take here, but I'm ready to say it. Okay, ready? Don't believe the lie that freedom is the goal. Entrepreneurs regularly say this. They say, freedom is what I'm trying to get to. More than I even want to be rich, I want to be free. I don't want to have any constraint around money in my life. Now, obviously, there is a sense in which this is a wonderful thing to have your needs provided for financially. That is really, really nice, to not be thinking about money, okay? And this is a distinction I make all the time, right? That is a very different place to be than like filthy, filthy rich. And I think it's fair to say that level of freedom is really nice. But a lot of people, what they mean by freedom is that they mean they want the total elimination of constraints wherever possible in their life. And here is my theory. The total elimination of constraints, when that is meant by freedom, isn't actually good for you and does not produce the most joy in your life. Not worrying about money is nice, but like, so many of the greatest constraints in your life are actually the sources of the greatest joy in your life. Let me give you a couple of examples. One of them is a spouse. A spouse is a constraint. When you get married, you say, in most cases, you say, I am only choosing you. I'm only choosing this one person. That is a constraint. And it is overtly a constraint on your freedom to go and pursue a whole bunch of other relationships. And I think it's just demonstrably the case, partly from studies and other things, that taking on that constraint instead of living a much freer, quote unquote, lifestyle is a path to more joy. And now, of course, marriages go wrong in all kinds of ways. I understand that. I understand. But the notion of that constraint is that it actually is part of what love looks like in somebody's life. And so that's the reason why the constraint is worthwhile. Another one is kids. Kids are a massive limitation on your freedom, overwhelming limitation on your freedom, even more than marriage in a lot of ways. Kids they just really constrain your freedom to do things. And yet it is worth it. It is worth it because the expansion of love in your life is the actual pathway to joy. I've been thinking so much, you've heard me use the phrase optimize for joy. I've been thinking so much about this, including how this works in my business. For me, like taking on a business partner this year is going to create a constraint for me. But I believe that the constraint of having a business partner with whom I now have to get, the time this is released, I'm now going to have his approval to do anything big in our business. Having that business partner, the constraint of having somebody else, I believe is going to be good for me, even though it materially reduces my freedom. And I believe that because I think it's going to make me work with another person, develop relationship with another person, be self-sacrificial, be thinking about somebody else in my life. And that will develop character in me. I also just value the input. And so I think he'll make me better. Patrick will make me better as an operator by being in those decisions and by making me accountable to things. Accountability in general, I think, is something that generally creates more joy. By committing yourself to something and having some accountability, you reduce freedom, you add a constraint, and yet that constraint also tends to build character in certain ways. And so many people are building their lives around this idea that someday they're going to have freedom to do whatever they want, whenever they want. I mean, working in general is a constraint, right? The idea that you have to go spend a bunch of time each day doing something to go make money or something. And I think removing those constraints for sort of unbridled, complete freedom it's just not obvious to me at all that it's something that's going to bring joy to anybody. So for me, that's another one of the things I've been getting clearer about this year in my own thinking in the e-commerce and entrepreneurial world. Number 7, so many people are still not investing in their supply chain. And it is crazy to me. I've said for a while, supply chain is the most under-optimized place in e-commerce. I might think CAC is actually that at the same time, despite how much, just because, again, it's the largest line item for so many businesses. But the other one is supply chain. And the best operators that I see, this is a really striking thing to me. I noticed it a lot this year. A couple of the very, very best operators that I've been around are like supply chain monsters, okay? They just really, really care about it and understand it deeply. Roman Khan, who's been on this podcast, talking about things like bills of material and why they deploy so many people in China on the ground in factories and around factories to hammer away at their supply chains. Maytab Bogle, just a killer operator who is so smart and so detail-oriented and so thoughtful about so many things. Maytab is one of those guys where you look at it and he just has a lot of thoughts about how to build a great supply chain and cares about it a lot and, talks about it a lot because he sees, I think, the value in doing that really, really well. I've been to Simple Modern's headquarters and can show you, been to specifically the manufacturing facility they built in the US for part of their business. Like they have really invested in supply chain in that business to care a lot about doing that really well. Now, I don't know how much of their total inventory it produces or whatever, but obviously that's a major supply chain investment. There's just so many people who don't really know how their products get made. They haven't shopped vendors. They haven't done a lot of little things. They've never really negotiated terms. They haven't thought about MOQs. They haven't thought about new product development seriously. I just think lots of people, especially earlier in the business, like sort of sub 4 or 5 million. Many brands haven't thought very hard about this. It's a weird thing. When you're earlier in your business, you typically have bigger gains you can make in your supply chain kind of all at once. It's less like incremental marginal stuff. But at the same time, you have less negotiating power. So to me, if you're early mid 7 figures, it's probably the place where you have the biggest opportunity here. If you're around 3 million, I bet you your supply chain can get a major overhaul and a major upgrade. I had another client a while back who did this, where they had worked with an initial manufacturer who was like a smaller manufacturer who got them up to 5 or 8 million or something like that in revenue. And they had so much loyalty to them because that manufacturer had been so good to them. But you know what happened when they brought on a real supply chain expert to go help them look at their vendors? Well, a much larger vendor could just work faster and cheaper than the small manufacturer. And just as much as they wanted to be loyal to the smaller one, they had to recognize the smaller one only had a place, maybe a new product development or something like that, but they couldn't really be the main manufacturer and it was just hurting too much in their cogs. All it took was for them to go invest in it and look at it and think rationally and objectively about it. Once they did that, it became very, very clear that they needed to go make a new kind of investment. And so they did. So just come back to it again. You need to be thinking about your supply chain. Many people have too high of MOQs. They're paying too much in cogs. They have too long of terms. They have not shopped enough manufacturers. They can get better quality. They can get it here faster. Like all of those, cut down lead time, all those things. I watch it happen over and over and over again. I always think back to my conversation with Lara Guevara, the CEO of Move Supply Chain, telling me about what it is like when she gets on discovery calls with potential clients to them as a supply chain agency, where she says, that operator will be talking to her, especially like early 7-figure, mid 7-figure operators. They'll be talking to her about what their supply chain is like. She's asking them questions to try to get a feel for it. And internally, she's just giggling because she knows, oh my goodness, in a few months, we can make a really big impact really, really fast for this business because they're so under optimized. I think it's a lot of businesses in that early 7-figure space. Go work on it. I just give you story after story like this. If you haven't done that yet and you're in that stage, it's really worth your time. It's a large project. You're going to have to work hard at it, but it can really make a big difference. I see it over and over and over again, especially in that stage of business. Number 8, AI requires deep time investment to be useful. Well, to be seriously useful. Pretty useful right away, even if you're not building incredible prompts or whatever. But all of the best, most impressive uses of AI I've seen have required huge amounts of hours on the front end to be like really, really powerful tools for people. They've required kind of coder level thinking, engineering style thinking for them to work. Certainly Prometheus, our creative co-writer that we have at AJF Growth, that is an amazing tool that produces incredible ad scripts very fast and also works within our whole Notion setup to publish those ad scripts into a process that's repeatable over time. That has taken up like hundreds of hours of Patrick's time to build it. And so there was no sort of fast way to get AI to just kind of do all of it for us. It required way too much deep thought work over time. I saw somebody say the other day on X, it was something like, maybe it was Cody Plofker saying something like most of the great AI use cases he sees right now are technical people using AI really well. And basically I think that's right. Some level, not necessarily that you have to be a true coder, but you have to be able to think sort of technically to make it do the thing you want it to do and think like a coder a little bit, because that's where the real value creation actually is. Otherwise, you get stuck in ruts, you get hallucinations, you get sort of limited usefulness, all these things. But to really make it a core part of things that are actually having a big impact, it requires time and effort. So the takeaway is put in the time and effort where it really matters, right? Think in terms of what kinds of efforts can I make that are actually going to create very, very large impacts. Don't get distracted by small little optimizations, because if it really requires deep time and effort, then you should be putting in deep time and effort for very large and impactful things. If you could do that, then it becomes a really, really, really good use of your time. It also is a good reminder to not believe the lie that somebody tells you that this new AI tool is going to change everything for you overnight in one click, and that's that. It's just not true. I haven't seen it. If it is true, maybe it'll be true soon, but I haven't seen it yet. And so right now, I'm just not believing it until I hear otherwise. And I'm comfortable not being the first mover there. If somebody else finds that at some point an ad maker gets out there that can make endless creative that's awesome, with the click of a button, fine. I will be in the middle percentage of people who discover it and start using it. I'm not going to be the first mover there because I've just been oversold too many times now. So the boy has cried wolf too much. So there's that. And finally, there is value in pursuing excellence. Another big observation of mine this year, I am somebody who thinks about my work in light of God and in those kinds of terms. And so in that case, if I'm trying to work as somebody who believes that life, in some way, everything we do ladders to a creator who made us to be certain ways and who calls us to behave certain ways, then I want to work as if to please him. But even if you are not religious, like even if you're not thinking about your life in those particular terms, then there's something to be said about just excellence for its own sake. So like this kind of comes back to a couple things I said earlier. Like I take a lot of pleasure in my work. I take a lot of joy in my work. And I also recognize that there's value in some levels of ambition, even if I'm not trying to create unconstrained freedom for myself. But like, I think what I'm trying to get at is that there is value in pursuing excellence in and of itself, even aside from the potential impacts of it. Like, for example, money. Even aside from the fact that I think doing an excellent job at building an agency is going to create more economic value for me and my family. I think it will. But even aside from that, there is something about the work of just saying, this is the task in front of me. This is where I am right now. Again, for me, this is where God has me right now in my life. In that case, I'm going to do this as best as I possibly can. And if I do that, if I apply myself to my work with that kind of mentality, then very likely I will be formed into the kind of person who does things better. I will learn skills that are better. I will just be prouder of the work that I do. There's something, an end in itself in the work quality. My clients will receive better from me. My employees will receive better from me. Excellence will attract better talent into my organization. People like being a part of something excellent. It's a good feeling. For all of these reasons, I just think there's a ton of value in excellence, including into forming me to be the kind of person who not only has a lot to offer in my work right now with my clients and employees and all those things, but also to form me into the kind of person who has more to offer to the world in the long term. Let's say that my work has absolutely no deep meaning in and of itself. The growing e-commerce business is just like a pure money play or something like that, right? Even if that's true, by disciplining myself to solve hard problems and work on hard problems and work through all those things, when I go at some point and decide, you know what, if I have a midlife crisis and think e-commerce doesn't matter at all, I'm going to throw all this off. When I go to some other charity organization and get on their board or go work for them or something, and I give my life to some other cause like this, the work I will have done in pursuing excellence now will make me better in those places also, because I will develop mental skills and work ethic skills and coping skills and people skills and all these things that translate into other areas of potential impact in my life. I'm 41 years old right now. My goal is to be a person who has something to contribute to the world for a long time. I think that's where, again, a lot of joy is to be found. That includes with my boys and with my wife and with my friends and with my church community and all these different places that I'm sort of show up as a person in the world. And the more that I can pursue excellence in my work without having it take over or something like that, the more value that I will be able to create, not only in that work itself, which is its own good, but also in the other things beyond that. I've been thinking and talking a lot this year about sort of purpose and meaning in work. Maybe that is because I'm 41, maybe because I found other people in our space who want to do that sort of thing. For me, it's just one of those conclusions I've come to. I want to hold myself to excellence. I want accountability to excellence. I want to pursue excellence. Patrick and I have put that a pursuit of excellence in our sort of formational documents and vision kind of documents as we've rethought AJF Growth as he's coming on as a partner, thought about sort of an EOS perspective on these things where you're forced into that kind of work. And excellence has continued to be a word that I really want to pursue. We want to be great because it will do all kinds of good things, not only now for us and our clients. And I believe that we are going to be an incredible agency. We're already, I think, a best-in-class agency right now. I think we're only going to be better all the time as we pursue that excellence. If you want to work with us, you should let me know. Go to ajfgrowth.com right now and do it. More excellence, holding myself to that standard is going to make better output now, and it's going to also make me into a kind of person who can do more, contribute more to the world in the long term. It's a constraint. Yeah, it is a constraint, but I think it will create the most joy. All right, that's it. I hope those end of the year observations were helpful to you. What ones would you add? What's been top of your mind this year? And what are you thinking about the most going into 2026? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear about it because I really do want to know. You can also email me, podcast@ajfgrowth.com. If you have any other thoughts on this episode, if you want to work with me at AJF Growth as we pursue excellence, you should come be part of it. So email me, or even better, fill out the intake form on my website, ajfgrowth.com. Tell me a little bit about your business so I can understand it a little bit better, what problems you're facing, etc. And let me know. If you want to work with me, I'll get an email. I'll respond to you there. And of course, follow up with my amazing sponsors. I love the sponsors for this podcast. Pretty much all of them are renewing in the next year because it's been a great relationship. So that's Move Supply Chain. So you can invest in that supply chain. Like I said, movesupplychain.com is a place to go there. INTELLIGEMS for great operators, really focusing on driving profit in their business. INTELLIGEMS.io with the code FARIS20, FARIS20 to get 20% off your first 3 months. Go check it all out right now. Subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Stay tuned. Great episodes coming up, including a huge brand founder soon. Maybe I'm not listening to my own advice about success stories, Curtis Matsko, but I actually have some other ones coming as well that are a wider range. So Curtis Matsko from Portland Logos is coming soon. You're not going to want to miss that. Subscribe wherever you are watching or listening so you don't, and I'll see you next time.